King Salvorin, the mighty ruler of the Vorak dominion, stood on the balcony of his palace, staring out into the cold, empty stars. His empire was crumbling, a shadow of its former glory. The Vorak people, once feared across the galaxy, had been defeated in battle after battle by a single force, the humans. It wasn't just their weapons or technology that had brought the Vorak to their knees. It was their determination, their adaptability, and their sheer will to survive. A human fleet, led by the infamous Commander Darius Kane, had shattered their dominance, forcing Salvorin into a corner where no option seemed possible. The king's mind raced as he thought about the human leader. Commander Darius Kane was unlike any other. He was a soldier, yes, but he was also a strategist, a tactician who understood the art of war in ways that Salvorin could not comprehend. For weeks, the human had given him no choice but to surrender. First, in a series of humiliating battles, then through a forced peace treaty. But now, standing before the king in his royal chamber, Darius didn't ask for the usual concessions of land, resources, or military secrets. Instead, he made a demand that shook Salvorin to his core. "You owe me," Darius said, his voice steady and unyielding. "Not just for the war, but for the countless lives you've taken and the suffering your empire has caused. And I want something you have, something priceless." Salvorin's heart pounded as he met the human's unflinching gaze. He knew what was coming. "My daughter, Princess Jaira, is to be given to me. In an unbreakable bond. She will be mine, and you will own nothing more." The king's hands clenched into fists. He had heard rumors of Jaira's rebellious spirit, how she had defied his orders, questioned his rule, and fought against the very traditions that defined the Vorak. She was fierce, independent, and utterly unwilling to conform to the ways of their people. She was a warrior, a leader in her own right, and yet she was his only heir. To give her away to a human was beyond unimaginable, a loss of face that the Vorak could never accept. But Darius had made it clear, this was the price. "You would dishonor me by making such a demand," Salvorin growled. "I'm not asking for your honor," Darius replied, his tone calm but with an edge of finality. "I'm asking for your debt to be repaid. You've led your people into ruin, and I've spared you. I've saved you. This is your payment, whether you like it or not." The words hung in the air, heavy and oppressive. Salvorin could feel his pride slipping away, piece by piece. He could not argue. The human had him cornered. If he refused, Darius would launch another war, one that the Vorak would surely lose. And then, not only would he lose his daughter, but he would lose everything. The empire, the legacy, and perhaps even his life. Jaira, the fierce princess, had no love for her father or his empire. But she was not one to be owned by anyone, especially a human. As she was summoned before her father, she could feel the tension in the air, the weight of her father's decision pressing down on her. She had heard the rumors, of course. Commander Darius was known across the galaxy as a ruthless tactician and a war hero. The idea that she would be forced into marriage with him made her blood boil. But what could she do? Her father, the mighty king, had made a deal, and she was the price. Jaira's heart burned with fury and defiance, but she would not go down without a fight. Whatever fate her father had chosen for her, she would carve her own path. No one owned her, not even a human. Princess Jaira's rage was a fire that could not be extinguished. As she stood before the grand doors of the royal palace, she clenched her fists, her sharp nails digging into her palms. She had just heard the terrible news. Her father, King Salvorin, had promised her to a human, a warrior who had bested their forces and shattered their dominance across the galaxy. A human. Her blood boiled at the very thought. To be given away like a prize for a debt she didn't even understand. The doors opened, and Commander Darius Kane entered the room, his footsteps echoing against the cold stone floors. He was tall, his presence commanding and yet strangely calm, as if he had already claimed victory. Darius's eyes met hers, but there was no arrogance in them, no sneer. Instead, there was a quiet, unwavering certainty, a sense of purpose. Jaira's heart fluttered with an emotion she quickly pushed aside. She would not be intimidated. She stepped forward, her eyes locked onto his. "So, this is your great victory, human." She spat, her voice laced with venom. "You defeat my people, destroy my empire, and now you come for me." Her words were like daggers, sharp and quick, but Darius didn't flinch. "Not for you," Darius replied evenly. "I don't want a trophy, Jaira. I want an ally, someone who understands the true cost of war, someone who can lead beside me, not be chained to a throne." Jaira's mind raced. Was he mocking her? An ally? A human wanted to ally with her? No, this wasn't a partnership. This was humiliation. She had been raised as the heir to the throne, trained to command and fight. Her bloodline demanded respect. Her people demanded respect. And now her father, the very king who had raised her to rule, was handing her over to a human. A human who had never faced the wrath of the Vorak. A human who would not understand the burden of leadership, the weight of the empire. "You don't get to talk to me like we're equals, human," Jaira hissed, her voice rising in fury. "You think I'll bow to you? I don't owe you anything." Darius stood unmoving, his expression unreadable. "You don't have to bow, Jaira," he said softly. "I never asked for that. What I ask is that you come with me, not as a prisoner, but as someone who wants to protect her people. The same way I want to protect mine." Jaira shook her head, unwilling to listen to his words. There was no honor in this. There was no dignity. Her heart thundered in her chest, and she could feel her anger rising once again. Before she could respond, two of her father's guards stepped forward, their eyes cold. It was a silent order. She was to go with him, whether she liked it or not. Jaira's pride screamed in defiance, but there was nothing she could do. They had already taken everything from her. She would not go willingly, though. She would fight. With a snarl, she lunged at Darius, her sharp claws aiming for his throat. She was fast, faster than most warriors, but Darius was ready. In a blur of movement, he caught her arm mid-air and twisted it, forcing her to the ground. The moment she hit the cold floor, she felt the sharp pain of defeat. Her eyes widened in shock. How had he moved so quickly? Darius's grip tightened for a moment longer, just enough to let her feel his strength, but not enough to harm her. He leaned down, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't want to break you, Jaira. I want to understand you. But you have to stop fighting me at every turn." Jaira, stunned by the sudden turn of events, found herself staring into his eyes, looking for some sign of deceit. There was none. He wasn't lying. And yet the idea that she would be at the mercy of a human still burned her with shame. Her pride could not let her accept this. Not now. Not ever. The room was silent as the tension between them simmered. Darius stood, offering his hand to help her up. Jaira stared at it for a long moment, her pride refusing to let her accept his help. But in the end, her body betrayed her. She took his hand, only because she knew it was the only way out. "I will not be a docile wife," she warned him, her voice cold as she rose to her feet. "You will never break me." Darius met her gaze. "I don't want to. I want you to be more than that. I want you to fight beside me." Her eyes burned with defiance as she spoke the words she would regret, but she spoke them anyway. "We'll see about that, human. We'll see." The days following the tense meeting between Princess Jaira and Commander Darius Kane were filled with nothing but silence and tension. Jaira was angry, furious, in fact, that her father had forced her into this situation. And now, as she stood aboard the Iron Revenant, Darius's warship, she felt a deep sense of betrayal. She was not a pawn, not a tool to be used in the human schemes. But Darius had made it clear. She was his responsibility now, and he wasn't going to make it easy for her. The ship's halls were massive, lined with cold metal, and lit only by the occasional light flickering above. Jaira had already explored every inch of the place, finding no comfort in its sterile, clinical environment. The human's technology was impressive, sure, but she felt like a prisoner, not a guest. She wasn't allowed to leave, to return to her people, or to do anything but comply with Darius's orders. The anger inside her continued to burn, but this time it was mixed with something else. Fear. Fear that she would never see her empire again. Fear that she would never be the warrior queen she was destined to become. It was in the mess hall, in the middle of the ship, that the real challenge came. Darius, calm as always, walked into the room where she had been trying to eat. He didn't sit. He didn't speak. Instead, he just motioned for her to follow him, his eyes steady, unwavering. Jaira clenched her jaw. She knew exactly what he wanted. He was challenging her, again. He had been talking about her training, about how she needed to adapt to human ways. She wasn't sure if he thought she was weak or if he was testing her resolve. Either way, she wasn't about to let a human teach her how to fight. With no words exchanged, they walked to the training room, a large, open space filled with various weapons and training dummies. Darius didn't need to say anything more. Jaira knew that this was it. The challenge was here, and this time, there would be no running away from it. Jaira grabbed a bladed staff, the weapon she had used since she was a child. Feeling its weight in her hands, she gripped it tightly, ready for anything. Darius, in contrast, stood calmly, his stance relaxed but alert. He didn't carry a weapon, and that in itself was a challenge. He didn't need one. She could see it in his eyes. He was confident. That was something she couldn't stand. "Let's see what you've got," Darius said, his voice low, but his challenge clear. Without warning, Jaira lunged forward, her staff slicing through the air toward him with blinding speed. Darius moved quickly, stepping aside, his body flowing like water as he avoided the blow. Jaira turned, her rage intensifying, and struck again, but Darius was faster this time, grabbing her wrist mid-swing and twisting it. She tried to fight back, but he already had her pinned, his strength like iron. "This is what you're up against, Jaira," Darius said, his voice still calm, but with a hint of something deeper. "You think just because you're strong, you can win. It's not enough. It's never enough." Jaira gritted her teeth, refusing to submit. She struggled in his grip, using her free hand to try and break free. But Darius only tightened his hold, his gaze unyielding. It wasn't about strength. It was about control. It was about using everything she had, her speed, her strategy, her mind, to beat him. She had been taught that brute force was the way to victory, but she was beginning to see something different. With a sudden burst of intelligence, Jaira spun, dropping her weight and using the momentum to throw Darius off balance. He stumbled for a moment, giving her the chance she needed. She twisted out of his grasp, grabbing her staff and aiming a powerful strike at his chest. But Darius was ready. In an instant, he shifted his body, his legs sweeping out and knocking her to the ground in one swift move. She hit the floor with a thud, wind knocked out of her, but she refused to stay down. Her pride wouldn't let her. "That's the difference between you and me," Darius said, extending his hand to help her up. "You fight with everything you have, but it's not enough. Not yet." Jaira took his hand, her mind racing with thoughts of revenge, of strategy. She would not lose. But in that moment, she knew Darius wasn't trying to humiliate her. He was trying to teach her. Something in her shifted. There was no place for pride, no place for arrogance, only adaptation. As she rose to her feet, ready to continue, Jaira understood. This was the beginning of a new journey, one where she would have to learn more than just how to fight. She would have to learn how to think, how to adapt, and how to lead in ways she never imagined. Days passed, and Jaira found herself slipping into a strange new routine aboard the Iron Revenant. The cold steel walls, the constant hum of engines, and the humbling realization that her world had shifted so drastically, it was all overwhelming. She had been a princess, a warrior, destined to rule over the Vorak Dominion. But now, she was at the mercy of a human, a soldier named Commander Darius Kane. In the beginning, she resented him. Every time he looked at her, she could feel his calmness, his confidence, and it only angered her more. How dare he be so unfazed? How dare he treat her not as a prisoner, but as an equal? She had been raised to rule, to command respect, but here, on his ship, she was nothing. Her weapons, her skills, her status, it all meant nothing in the face of his quiet strength. Yet, despite her bitterness, there was something about Darius that intrigued her. Jaira could not ignore it, no matter how hard she tried. It wasn't just his ability to best her in every fight, or his unshakable resolve. It was the way he listened. In all her years, no one had ever truly listened to her, not like this. Darius asked her questions, not just about war and tactics, but about her. Her thoughts, her ideas. Jaira had been taught to value strength above all else, to see everything through the lens of battle and power. Yet Darius showed her a different side of humanity, a side that valued intelligence, creativity, and adaptability. Over the course of their time together, she found herself learning, not just from his victories in combat, but from the way he strategized. One afternoon, as Jaira sat in the ship's observation deck, watching the stars streak by, Darius joined her. It had been a week since their last training session, and the silence between them had grown less uncomfortable. She hadn't been able to shake the feeling that something had changed within her. It was as if Darius had slowly chiseled away at the walls she had built around herself. "You look lost in thought," Darius said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but there was a warmth to it that she hadn't expected. Jaira turned to him, her expression guarded. "I was thinking about my people, about the empire I've lost." Darius studied her carefully, his eyes sharp. "You mean the empire that was built on fear and oppression?" Jaira's heart skipped a beat, her mind flashing to the countless battles she had fought for her father, the countless lives lost in the name of the Vorak Dominion. She had never questioned it before. Could he be right? Could the empire she had fought for, bled for, be as flawed as he said? "Not all of us were like that," she said, her voice tinged with defensiveness. "I fought for my people, for a future where we would not be ruled by fear alone." Darius nodded slowly, as if considering her words. "I don't doubt that you believe that, Jaira. But what I'm saying is that there's a different way to lead, one that doesn't rely on destruction and control. There's a way to build something stronger, something that doesn't require you to break everything around you to make it work." Her eyes narrowed. "And what is this different way you speak of? What is this so-called peace?" Darius's lips curved into a slight smile. "Peace isn't about avoiding conflict, Jaira. It's about understanding the bigger picture. It's about seeing that people are not just tools to be used. They're the foundation of everything. The key to victory isn't in crushing them beneath your heel, but in lifting them up, letting them stand beside you." Jaira stared at him, her thoughts a whirlwind. She had never thought of it that way. The Vorak had ruled with an iron fist for centuries, believing that power was everything. To think of leadership as something more than just domination, it was almost a foreign concept to her. "Your people must be different," she said quietly. "They must have learned it somewhere, right?" Darius smiled again, but this time, there was something gentle in his eyes. "It wasn't easy. We learned the hard way, but we found our way through the strength of each other. We fight together, not against each other." Jaira's chest tightened as she thought about her own people, how they had been torn apart by their rulers, by fear, by a deep-seated belief that only the strong should rule. Was it too late for them? Could she, a warrior princess, somehow help rebuild what had been lost? Darius stood, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know it's hard to imagine, but you're not alone in this, Jaira. I won't abandon you, and I won't let you lose everything you fought for." For the first time, Jaira allowed herself to believe in his words, not because she trusted him completely, but because, in that moment, She realized that maybe, just maybe, there was a different path ahead. One where strength and compassion could coexist. And for the first time in a long while, Jaira felt a flicker of hope. As the days on the Iron Revenant passed, Jaira's understanding of her new reality began to shift. She had come aboard the human ship as a captive, full of rage and defiance, determined to never bend to their will. But something had changed in her, something she couldn't ignore. It wasn't just Darius's way of thinking that intrigued her. It was the possibilities he spoke of, the potential for a future that didn't rely on violence and fear. Yet, as she learned more about Darius and his world, she began to see that the humans' way of thinking wasn't universally accepted. There were those among them who still believed in conquest and power. And Jaira quickly realized that a human society built on peace wasn't as stable as it appeared. The cracks were there, hidden beneath the surface, and the human leader had a hard fight ahead of him, not just against external enemies, but against the enemies within his own ranks. One evening, as Jaira stood on the deck, watching the stars stretch out before her, she noticed a small group of human officers whispering among themselves in the corner. Their voices were low, but she caught enough of their words to know that they were speaking about her and about Darius. "She'll never fit in with us. We're soldiers, not politicians. What makes you think this will work?" one of them said, his tone dripping with skepticism. Jaira's heart tightened. She had heard the rumors, of course. Some humans still believed the Vorak were beneath them, even after the peace treaty. But she had hoped, foolishly, that Darius's leadership would change their perspective. Clearly, that wasn't the case. She stepped forward, approaching the group. The officers fell silent when they saw her, their eyes flicking nervously between each other. Jaira's gaze was sharp as she spoke. "Do you question Darius's decision to keep me alive? To offer me a chance to lead beside him?" The officer who had spoken first, a tall man with a stern expression, gave her a curt nod. "It's not personal, Princess. We just believe that this arrangement doesn't make sense. You're a warrior, not a diplomat. You'll never understand our ways. And Darius, he's blinded by this idea of peace. He's forgetting who the real enemies are." Jaira's pulse quickened. "And who are the real enemies, then?" she asked, her voice low and steady. "Not the Vorak. Not anymore," the officer sneered. "The real enemies are the ones who want to weaken us, the ones who think Darius is too soft. You're a symbol of that. And the people won't accept it, not for long." The words struck Jaira like a punch to the gut. She had thought that by coming here, by following Darius, she could help her people. She had believed that the human alliance would bring strength, not division. But now, standing before these men, she saw the fault lines running through the heart of Darius's plan. There were those who would never accept the peace he fought so hard to build. She stepped closer, her eyes cold. "So you plan to destroy him? To destroy everything he's worked for?" The officer's lips curled into a faint smile, his voice laced with disdain. "We don't have to destroy him. We just need to make sure he knows who's in charge. The peace he's trying to create, it's weak. And the moment the enemy senses that weakness, they'll strike. They'll tear us apart." Jaira's hands clenched into fists. The words burned in her ears, but her mind raced. These men, these soldiers, were loyal to the idea of power. They didn't care about unity, about working together for a future that could benefit all. All they cared about was dominance, the same way the Vorak had once ruled. But Jaira couldn't allow herself to get lost in the anger she felt. Darius's vision was the right one. She had to believe that. She had to fight for it. She was not just a warrior anymore. She was a leader, and that meant she would have to make tough choices. "Mark my words," Jaira said, her voice quiet but strong. "If you attempt to tear this alliance apart, I will stand against you. I will fight for the peace Darius believes in, because it's the only chance we have left." The officers stared at her for a moment, their expressions unreadable. But Jaira could see the flicker of doubt in their eyes. They were not as certain of their path as they pretended. As she turned to walk away, a sense of resolve settled over her. She wasn't just fighting for the Vorak anymore. She was fighting for something bigger. For a future where peace wasn't just a dream. Where people, no matter their species, could stand side by side without fear of domination. Jaira knew that the real enemy wasn't just out there, on the battlefield. It was also within their ranks, those who still believed in power at any cost. But she wasn't afraid. She was a warrior, and no matter the enemy, she would fight with everything she had. As time passed, Jaira began to notice the subtle changes aboard the Iron Revenant. What had once been a place of cold efficiency and quiet tension now felt like a powder keg, the smallest spark threatening to set everything ablaze. The whispers among the crew had grown louder, the looks more pointed. It was no longer just a few officers who questioned Darius's leadership. They were everywhere. The dissent was spreading like wildfire, and Jaira could feel the weight of it pressing down on her chest. She had tried to ignore it at first. She had hoped that if she focused on learning, on becoming the leader her people needed, the unrest would fade away. But it didn't. Every conversation she had, every meeting she attended, there was always someone questioning Darius's choices. They didn't trust him, and they certainly didn't trust her. They saw her as a symbol of everything they feared, the weakening of their military might, the softening of their empire. Jaira couldn't deny the truth of their words. She had seen how fragile Darius's dream of peace really was. It was one thing to speak of unity, but it was another thing entirely to make it a reality. The fear of losing power ran deep, especially among those who had spent their lives fighting wars and conquering worlds. They couldn't simply turn off that instinct, that need for dominance. And now, Jaira was beginning to wonder if it was too late. Could peace truly be built in a world where so many were determined to destroy it? One evening, after a tense meeting with the crew, Jaira found herself standing alone in the observation deck once more. The stars stretched out before her like an endless sea of possibility, but she felt no comfort in them anymore. The future, once so bright, now seemed clouded. She thought about her people, about her father, and about everything she had lost in the pursuit of a dream. Was it worth it? Could she truly change everything, or was she just fighting an impossible battle? Thinking about the future again, Jaira turned to see Darius approaching, his face calm but his eyes filled with understanding. He had noticed her distant look, the same way he always did. She sighed and shook her head. I don't know what to think anymore, Darius. The crew, they're questioning everything. I feel like I'm losing them. Like I'm losing you. Darius stepped closer, his voice steady as always. You're not losing me, Jaira, but you're right to be concerned. The road ahead isn't easy, and it's not going to get any easier. Not with so many who still believe in power over peace. Jaira crossed her arms, frustration creeping into her voice. How do we change them? How do we make them understand that peace isn't weakness? That we don't have to dominate every world we encounter? Darius looked out at the stars, his expression distant. It's not about changing them, Jaira. It's about showing them. Leading by example. The ones who are ready to follow will come with us. The ones who aren't. He paused, his gaze hardening. There'll be a problem, but not one we can't handle. Jaira frowned. And how do we handle them? What if they rise up against us? What if they're too powerful to stop? Darius turned back to her, his eyes locking onto hers. We do what we've always done. We fight. But we fight for something bigger than just victory. We fight for the future we believe in. For the future where strength is used to protect, not to destroy. Jaira's heart pounded in her chest. She had always believed in the strength of her people, in the might of the Vorak Dominion. But Darius was right. Strength alone wasn't enough. They needed unity, they needed purpose. She couldn't afford to let fear control her anymore. We can't do it alone, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We need to bring others to our side. We need to show them that peace can work, that we can be stronger together. Darius nodded. Exactly. But the first step is to trust each other. We need to be united in that vision. And when the time comes to confront those who would tear us apart, we'll be ready. Jaira met his gaze, a sense of resolve building within her. For the first time, she felt the weight of her responsibility clearly. It wasn't just about fighting for her people anymore. It was about fighting for the entire galaxy. A future where peace could thrive, where strength didn't have to come at the cost of everything else. But she knew, deep down, that the battle was only beginning. The seeds of rebellion had already been planted, and it wouldn't be long before the storm they had been avoiding would arrive. The question was, could they weather it? Could they hold on to their dream of unity, or would it be crushed beneath the weight of those who refused to change? As Jaira stared out at the stars, she made a vow to herself. She wouldn't give up. No matter what came next, she would fight for a future where peace could truly reign, no matter the cost. The tension aboard the Iron Revenant had reached a boiling point. No one could deny it any longer. The crew was divided. Darius could feel it in every command he gave, every look thrown his way. He had always known that peace was fragile, but now, it seemed like the dream he had fought for was slipping through his fingers. There were whispers in the corridors, muttered voices plotting in the shadows. And amidst it all, Jaira stood beside him, a constant reminder that she too had once fought for power, for control. But now, she was his ally in this delicate battle for unity. One day, as the ship made its way through a particularly hostile sector, a loud alarm broke the silence of the command deck. Darius's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't a drill. The Vorak warships had arrived, unannounced, and with weapons hot. "Report," Darius barked as he rushed to the control panel. His mind raced. They had been warned about the possibility of an ambush. But this felt like more than just a skirmish. This felt like a declaration of war. "We're being targeted by 3 Vorak destroyers, sir," the communications officer yelled over the din of the alarms. "They've cut off all escape routes." Jaira, who had been standing quietly by Darius's side, stepped forward. Her eyes narrowed as she studied the tactical display. "This isn't just an attack, Darius. This is a message." He met her gaze, his jaw tightening. He had suspected as much. The Vorak didn't attack without a reason, especially now. It wasn't just the Dominion's pride on the line. It was her father's power. Jaira's presence aboard the ship, her connection to the Vorak throne, had always been a sore spot for many. And now they were making their move. "We need to act fast," Darius said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "Get us out of here. Full speed ahead. All hands to battle stations." Jaira hesitated for a moment, her mind racing with conflicting thoughts. She knew the Vorak, and she knew what they were capable of. But she also knew this was her chance, the moment she had been dreading. It wasn't just her people attacking. They were coming for her. To remove her, to erase any hope of peace between their worlds. For the first time, Jaira felt the weight of her old life and her new one collide. She had spent years as a warrior, learning the art of war, of command. But this was different. This wasn't just about winning a battle. This was about saving everything they had fought for, everything they had worked to build. "Target their engines," Darius ordered. Jaira nodded, moving quickly to her station. She was a strategist, and she knew what had to be done. "I'll get you an opening," she said, her voice steady, even though her heart was pounding in her chest. The battle was intense. The ship rocked violently as the Vorak warships unleashed their firepower, but the Iron Revenant held strong. Jaira worked with the crew, guiding them through evasive maneuvers, while Darius barked orders to the crew, keeping everything in motion. She could feel the weight of the crew's eyes on her, some of them still skeptical, others waiting to see if she could truly be trusted. But despite their doubt, Jaira didn't waver. She had fought for this. She had fought for peace, and now she would fight to protect that dream. As the Iron Revenant dodged another barrage of fire, Jaira sought her chance. With quick precision, she targeted the engines of the lead Vorak destroyer, her fingers flying over the controls. The ship's targeting system locked on. Now, Darius, take the shot. Darius didn't hesitate. Fire. The cannon fired, a brilliant burst of energy streaking across the space between them. The shot hit its mark, and the Vorak destroyer's engines exploded in a fiery display. But they weren't done yet. Two more ships remained, their weapons charging for another attack. Jaira's eyes burned with determination. She knew what needed to be done. We don't have much time. We can't let them regroup. If we can take down their command ship, they'll fall apart. Darius nodded sharply, understanding her plan. I'm with you, Jaira. Let's finish this. With a final surge of energy, the Iron Revenant plunged into the heart of the battle, maneuvering with unmatched agility. Together, they took down the remaining ships, one by one, their resolve never faltering. As the last Vorak warship exploded into space, silence descended on the ship. The battle was over, but the storm was far from finished. The crew had fought alongside them, but Jaira could sense the changing tides. This battle had been won, but it was only the beginning. The seeds of rebellion were still there, simmering beneath the surface. Jaira turned to Darius, her expression unreadable. We've won this battle, she said quietly, but there are more to come. Darius's eyes met hers, his gaze unwavering. Then we'll face them together, no matter what. The aftermath of the battle left the Iron Revenant and its crew in a tense silence. The Vorak warships were destroyed, but the cost of the victory weighed heavily on everyone aboard. The atmosphere in the command deck was thick with uncertainty. Even though they had successfully defended their ship, it was clear that the true fight was just beginning. The Vorak Empire was not one to back down easily, and now Jaira's presence aboard the human vessel had become a point of open conflict. Jaira stood by the viewports, staring at the stars outside. The endless stretch of space seemed colder now. She had felt the heat of battle, the thrill of victory, but now that it was over, there was an emptiness. She had fought for peace, for a future where all species could stand together. But now, the path ahead felt more uncertain than ever. The crew had fought well, but Jaira couldn't ignore the whispers she had heard. There were still many among them who would rather fight the Vorak than work alongside them. Many saw her as a traitor, a symbol of a weak peace. As the ship cruised through the void, Jaira turned her attention back to Darius, who was giving orders to his officers. He seemed calm, but she could see the strain in his eyes. He was bearing the weight of leadership, of trying to keep a fractured crew united, and it was a heavy burden. Darius, she called softly as she approached him. He glanced up, his gaze softening when he saw her. Jaira, how are you holding up? She gave him a small, weary smile. I should be asking you that. The crew's unsettled. The battle was won, but I feel like we've lost something. Darius nodded slowly, his expression hardening. I know. The crew is divided, Jaira. Some of them respect what we're trying to do, but others, they still believe that peace is a pipe dream. They've been trained to conquer, to fight. It's hard for them to believe in anything else. Jaira crossed her arms, thinking carefully. The Vorak will never stop. My father will send more forces if we don't act. But I'm beginning to think that this war isn't just with them. It's with ourselves. Darius met her eyes, his lips tight. I've always known that the biggest threat isn't from outside. It's from within. The fear of change, of losing control. Some of them would rather see us fail than see this alliance succeed. The words hit her harder than she expected. It was true. Her father's empire had been built on fear and dominance. Now, even though she fought for something different, something better, the shadow of that old way of thinking still loomed large. She had hoped that with time, Darius's dream of unity would take root, but the seeds of rebellion were still there, lurking in the hearts of those who didn't understand, who couldn't understand. Jaira's thoughts were interrupted by a loud bang echoing through the ship. The sound was sharp, unmistakable, the unmistakable sound of a ship's bulkhead being breached. Battle stations. Darius's voice rang out, filled with urgency. Jaira's pulse quickened as she followed Darius to the central command. "What's happening?" she asked, her heart racing. "We're under attack," Darius said grimly. "It's not the Vorak. We've been boarded. A faction within our own ranks, those who still believe in the old ways." Jaira's blood ran cold. She had feared this moment, and now it had come. A faction of rebellious officers had decided to act, trying to take control of the ship. They had made their move, and the battle for the future of the Iron Revenant was now a fight for survival. "Do we have a plan?" Jaira asked, her voice steady even though her heart was pounding in her chest. Darius turned to face her, determination in his eyes. "We fight them. We take back control. And when we do, we make sure they know that the dream we're fighting for is bigger than any one man or any one empire." Jaira nodded, feeling the weight of the decision settle over her. She had always been a warrior. But now, this was more than just a fight for survival. This was a fight for the soul of the Alliance, a fight to show that peace was worth pursuing, even when everything around them seemed to be falling apart. As the crew scrambled to prepare for the imminent attack, Jaira couldn't help but feel a fire ignite within her. She wasn't going to let them destroy everything she and Darius had worked for. They had a vision, a future that was worth fighting for. And she would fight, not just as a warrior, but as a leader, determined to prove that peace could win, no matter the odds. The doors to the command center burst open, and the sound of combat echoed from the halls beyond. Jaira glanced at Darius one last time. "Let's show them what we're made of." Together, they stepped into the storm, ready to face the battle that would determine the future of their people and of the galaxy itself. The battle within the Iron Revenant was unlike any Jaira had ever fought. The crew members who had once been her comrades, her allies, now stood against her in the narrow halls, their eyes filled with the bitter resolve of those who refused to see change. They believed in the old ways, in the rule of power, and they were willing to destroy the dream of peace that Jaira and Darius had worked so hard to build. As the fight raged on, Jaira moved swiftly through the ship's corridors, her mind focused, every step deliberate. The rebels, once loyal to the Vorak Empire, now fought to overthrow the peace they didn't believe in. They wanted control. They wanted the power they had known their entire lives. And Jaira understood why. She had seen that same hunger for dominance in her own heart, in her own people. But now, it was her turn to fight for something else, for a future where strength was used to protect, not to conquer. Jaira's comm unit crackled to life. Darius's voice came through, steady and calm despite the chaos. "Jaira, we're almost there. The main control room is under their control. We need to retake it, or we'll lose everything. I'm on my way." Jaira responded, her voice sharp with resolve. Every part of her wanted to give in to fear, to doubt. But she couldn't. This was it. The final push. If they could just reclaim the heart of the Iron Revenant, they could stop the rebellion in its tracks. As she turned a corner, Jaira saw them. Dozens of rebels blocking the way, armed and ready to fight. Their faces were set in grim determination, but she could see the cracks in their armor, the uncertainty in their eyes. They didn't want to be here. They were only following orders, driven by the same fear that had haunted her for so long. She paused for a moment, her fingers tightening around the hilt of her weapon. There was a time when she would have fought without hesitation, when the battle would have been an easy decision. But now she hesitated, knowing that each life she took would be a step further away from the peace they all needed. "Jaira, don't hesitate," Darius's voice reminded her through the comms. "We need to end this. For the future." She took a deep breath, nodding to herself. "I'm ready," she whispered, pushing forward. The rebels opened fire as she charged, but Jaira was quick, using the walls for cover, moving with precision. Her mind was clear, her focus razor-sharp. She wasn't fighting for power. She wasn't fighting for dominance. She was fighting for something much bigger. For a future where no one had to live in fear. for a galaxy where peace wasn't just a dream, but a reality. One by one, the rebels fell, but Jaira didn't revel in their defeat. Each victory felt like a necessary step, not a triumph. She pushed forward, her pulse quickening as the control room door came into view. Darius was already there, his face set in grim determination. He looked at Jaira as she approached, his eyes meeting hers with an unspoken understanding. Together, they opened the door, confronting the last of the rebels who had taken control of the ship. There was a moment of tense silence before the final confrontation began. The rebels were fewer now, their morale shattered. Jaira's weapon hummed in her hands, ready to strike if necessary. But she didn't want to fight anymore. She wanted to end this, once and for all. Enough, Jaira called out, her voice strong. This ship, this mission, it's not about power. It's about something better. We're all fighting for the same thing, for the future of our people. The rebels hesitated, confusion flickering across their faces. Jaira could see it. The doubt, the uncertainty. They weren't so different after all. This isn't the way, Jaira continued, her voice softer now. We can choose a different path, one where we don't have to fight anymore. Let's build something together, a future where our children don't have to live like this. For a long moment, no one moved. Jaira stood there, panting, her heart still racing. But now, there was a sense of peace, a sense of possibility. They had won. The rebellion had been stopped. But more importantly, the dream of unity, the dream of a future where all species could coexist, was still alive. As Jaira looked at Darius, a sense of relief washed over her. They had made it. They had fought the hardest battle of their lives and come out victorious. But this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. Together, they would rebuild. Together, they would show the galaxy that peace was worth fighting for. And in the end, it was not the power of war that would define them, but the strength of their resolve to build a future where all could live in harmony. And as the Iron Revenant sailed through the stars, Jaira knew that their work was far from over. But for the first time in a long while, she felt hope. True hope for the future.